episode 16. And today we're going to be talking about why learning too much can kill your action or kill your business. And here at Founding Without Funding, the principle of this is to make sure that you're actually doing as opposed to just learning or just planning. So, learning kind of goes hand in hand with the planning. I think a lot of people are spending too much time learning slash planning and not enough doing and executing. So, I think part of that is kind of the fear of it not working and also the procrastination. We all deal with procrastination. I deal with it. Everyone deals with it. It's a natural human thing. We all procrastinate a little bit, usually pushing away the things that we don't want to do or that might take us more time or more energy or really more brain power. A lot of times it's like, oh, I'm going to have to really think about this. So I'm going to kind of push this off. And I think thinking that you need to learn too much or thinking that you need to plan too much is almost another way of procrastinating. And so we really got to cut through that and make sure that we're actually, planning something to actually do it, as opposed to just planning to plan or just learning to learn. So some people will just get wrapped up in, endless podcasts or YouTube videos or courses even. One of the big things that I wanted to do when I made the Founding Without Funding course is to make sure that it's short and that it's concise and that it has actionable items. That way, when you're finished taking the course, you actually have something to go do. So a lot of the Founding Without Funding course is actually doing things as opposed to just learning. So I would recommend anybody that's, listening to these different podcasts or doing any courses, just like the Founding Without Funding course, make sure that you're taking courses that actually give you actionable items and where the bulk of the course is to actually do something as opposed to just learn something. So learning and doing two different things, planning and doing two different things. Now, do they go hand in hand? Yes, but learning without actually doing is useless. And planning without actually executing is also useless. So it all goes hand in hand. Ideally, you want to learn about what you're doing. You want to plan out what you're about to do. And then you want to go out there and execute it as best as possible. And then you're going to get the feedback from doing that and adjust, and get the feedback from doing that and adjust. And then that's going to be the cycle that's going to lead you to be able to actually make sales and to, expand and grow your business. Now, I would say that there are so many free resources out there that you don't necessarily need to pay for anything. There's courses, obviously, the Founding Without Funding courses out there as well. So there's some paid courses and stuff too. I would recommend, no matter what happens, that you just get out there and do it, whether it's a paid course, whether it's free, whether you're listening to podcasts. There's plenty of information out there. Make sure that you're using it to learn, but don't get caught up in that learning mode. You want to learn so that you can plan, and you want to plan so that you can execute. And it all works hand in hand, and none of it works without the other pieces, especially the last piece, which is execution. Because somebody who's willing to go out there and execute is going to beat somebody who's only willing to plan. There's no doubt about it. They could not have a plan at all. And if they're out there executing, they're going to do better than the person who's only planning because they haven't even attempted to execute. Now, I know that learning feels safe because you feel like you're getting something accomplished, but I do want to just put out there that learning itself is not really accomplishing anything unless you're actually putting it into action. Now, everybody knows, that type of person who's obsessed with school. It seems like they never actually get a job. They just keep going to more school and, the different specialty degrees or programs. And you're going, well, when are you ever going to work? I think some people are addicted to the learning and to the school. And one of the parts of that is that just getting through it makes you feel like you're accomplishing something, as opposed to when you're out there creating action and executing ideas, the act of doing it does not necessarily put you in a further place. It could put you even further behind. But there's a safety in education to where if you just get through the book or get through the class or get through the test, then you actually furthered yourself and accomplished something. But really, if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's not really the case. You haven't accomplished anything until you've gone out there and done something. So you want to learn, then you want to plan, then you want to execute. In that order, all three things together. So let's talk about, what actually creates results. So what actually creates results is obviously getting out there and getting in front of people. Now, conversations are typically the biggest part of execution. So whether that means talking to people via email or LinkedIn or DMs or on the phone, in order to get your business out there and build your business or sell your product or service, you're going to have to speak to people. Maybe that's people coming in from advertisement campaigns. Maybe you have all the processes automated, which is the great first step. And everybody does need that as a basis. But the conversations you have with people are what's going to really push things forward. So if you're not having conversations every day with either your customers or your partners or your vendors or whatever it is that you need to put in place, then you're probably not getting anywhere, because conversations are what's going to push things forward. If you're not having conversations with different people every day, then chances are you're not pushing forward as much as you need to. And again, that doesn't have to be conversations with customers necessarily, but it could be conversations with your business partners. It could be conversations with some of the vendors or people that you network with or affiliates, or maybe your salespeople and your staff. If there's conversations going on, then you're making some kind of progress. And if there's not, you can probably bet that you're not making very much progress if there's no conversations going on. Now, when you're learning and in the learning phase, you need to make sure that you're implementing that learning in the right way. And so one thing that I would do is, first, I would keep some type of journal or documentation. And nowadays it's probably online. It could be as simple as a Google Doc of what it is that you're trying to learn and how you're going to use it. So I would always recommend following motivational speakers or successful business people. I would recommend that in your free time, instead of binge watching something on Netflix, that you do listen to some type of business podcast, or maybe you watch shows like Shark Tank or The Profit. Those are the things that I love to watch, because while you're still taking your leisure time and watching TV and relieving some stress, you're also kind of getting that business into your mind. And I tell you what, after I watch one of those business type shows, the first thing I want to go do is work on my business. And so instead of watching another show like you would on Netflix when another episode comes up, I stop that episode and say, I want to go work on my business, because I was motivated. So while I do recommend that, to take in as much information as you can, if you're actually setting out to learn a specific thing about business, I would definitely keep track of that. And I would definitely write the things down that you're learning that apply to you. So when you get those little kernels of information, those little golden nuggets that apply to you, I would write them down. And I do this a lot. I just will jot things down, an idea. Maybe I hear a motivational speaker talk about it, a business person. Maybe I hear it in a podcast, whatever it is. If I feel that it applies to me, I'll jot it down somewhere. And again, typically with me, I'm so, on computers and on my phone all the time that typically it's going to be on a Google Doc. And my point here is that take the things that apply to you and focus on those that apply to you and your business, instead of just taking in all this information and letting it swirl around your head or go in one ear and out the other. Write down those things that apply to you. When you hear those things, say, you know what? I could apply that to my business. I want to write that down, so that by the time you actually go to work on your business, you have those things to say, yeah, I picked up that little kernel of information that I feel like we can implement into our sales, or that I feel like we could implement into our manuals, or I need to write up these documents like, this person said that was a great idea. So it's not just about learning, it's about learning something specific to your business, your product, your service, or even you yourself, right? A lot of this is things that I will jot down that I've heard from other successful people that I feel like I need to do myself personally, personal growth or a personal outlook on things. So it's not just, business information, it's also personal motivation and inspiration and ways that you can structure your life. But it's not going to do much if you don't write it down. So I would say make sure you have somewhere to write it down. If you don't have somewhere, just create a new Google Doc. If you're out and about, it could be easy as notes in your phone. But the point is to come back to it and to know that this is the part of what I was listening to or what I was watching or what I was reading that applies to me in my business. And I want to come back to that when I sit down again and work on my business. And I think that's very important to do. You're not just learning for learning's sake. You're learning for specific reasons. You're writing those reasons down so that you can apply them to what you're actually doing instead of just getting a lot of information. And we can all only keep so much information in our brain, right? So we want to make sure that we write down what applies to us. And with that being said, I would try to apply it immediately, right? You want to do it as soon as possible. When you hear that, when you get inspired by that speaker or that book or that social media clip, whatever it is, you want to try to act now while the passion is hot, right? While you're excited about it. I think it's so important to create action when you are motivated in that moment because excitement fades. And so the moment that you're excited about an idea or a product or a service or a way to go about doing that, not only write it down, but start the action because you're going to get more done. You're going to get better work done when you're excited. And excitement will fade, especially if it doesn't come with any action. Now, if you start creating action that has to do with that idea, it can keep the excitement going. Now, okay, it's coming to life. You were excited about this idea. Now it's starting to come to life. So you're getting even more excited about it. But if you don't have any action that goes along with that idea, eventually that idea and that excitement will fade. And so it's important that you actually take action with that idea while it's hot, while it's fresh, and while it's still exciting to you. Now, I would also keep things simple when you're learning. I wouldn't try to learn about 100 different topics. I would try to focus on what it is that you're doing. So, for example, if you're picking out a book to read, I would make sure that it's a specific book on something that you're looking to do. And some books are like general self-help books and stuff, which are great too. But if you're learning for your business and you're trying to immediately apply these things to your business, I would pick out something pretty specific in order to actually put it to use immediately. All right. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and take some questions here. Let's see here. You can drop any questions you have in the live chat. Remember, we are live here on all the different platforms, X, Facebook, YouTube, Kick, Twitch, all that kind of stuff. So you can drop any comments you have here live, and I'll answer some questions that have already been asked here. So a question from Emily is, I feel like I know a lot about business, but I'm not making money. How do you break that cycle? Well, I think there's a lot of people that know a lot about business, but aren't making money. And I think that's just lack of action. I mean, I couldn't tell you for each specific person, but if you're feeling like that you know so much about business, but the money's not actually coming in, I would say take it back to the basics. You have to break down what your core product or service is and get that cash flowing, go from 0 to 1. Don't focus on this. Oh, I know so much about business. I could build a giant business and have 100 employees. Well, first, let's go from 0 to 1. Let's start making some sales and then build the business around that and use your business knowledge. As an example for me, when I started my company when I was 15, my business partner helped incorporate the company because he was 18 and I couldn't open a bank account for a business or anything like that because I was only 15. And so, my business partner went to college and he went to business school. And so he learned all this information, way more information than I ever had, but it was me who was actually building the company and making sales. So while he was in school, going to business school in college and getting his degree, majoring in business, I was actually out there really majoring in business, meaning that I was out there conducting business and I was out there actually making sales. So by the time he graduated with a business degree, he had all this knowledge, but I had sales. And that is what matters. I got out there, got the product or service in front of people, and was actually able to make sales and create a real business while this person was still just full of a bunch of information that they haven't done anything with yet. And they still needed to go along the entire road that I went on because they had the knowledge, but they didn't have the action. So the action is way more important than the knowledge. But I will say that once you start creating those sales, once you start building that company, once you start having staff and you have to, follow all the laws and do all this type of stuff, that's when that knowledge comes more in handy. So if you're at the stage where you're still just trying to make sales and build things up, I would focus much more on that. And then later, when you have a lot more responsibilities because the company has grown, that's when you can start learning more about those things, about the paperwork, about accounting, about HR, all these different things that you're going to need when you're building a much larger company. Okay, question from Marcus here. Is it bad that I've bought multiple courses but haven't finished any of them yet? I wouldn't say that it's necessarily bad. I would say that if you're not going to finish courses, you should probably start with some free ones. Again, the Founding Without Funding course is a very actionable course. It's not something where you're just going to watch some videos and then you're going to move along and say, hey, I learned something. No, we're talking about actually stopping the course, doing the things that we're talking about, creating actionable items. So I would say if you're taking any courses, it should probably be one like Founding Without Funding, where it's actually creating actionable items as opposed to just teaching you things, because teaching you things is not going to do anything if you don't have the actual push and knowledge and requirement to go out there and make something happen. Okay, question here from Rachel. What's the difference between learning strategically and just binge consuming content? So that's a great question. What's the difference between just, binge consuming a lot of content and thinking that you're learning, or learning specifically? Again, I would say that it's about what you're picking out, because you can listen to anything that you want, but you want to focus on what applies to you. And we all know during a course or during a speech or during a YouTube video or during a social media reel, the one thing that business expert or motivational speaker says that hits home with us. And I think what's important is to write that down and make sure that you're fully remembering and understanding what it is that you learned that's directly applicable to you and your business. Taking in a bunch of information is great. Of course, you can take in information from everybody, especially if you're listening to business experts, you're taking courses, you're listening to speeches, maybe you're going to conferences. I love conferences, love events. Whatever it is, you need to make sure you hold on to those golden nuggets that you get. I think far too much, and even myself in the past, we go through these things, we learn, we go through courses, or we go to a conference and hear a speaker, and we don't permanently take away what we need to from that information. A lot of the times it might motivate us right then, it might give us some ideas right then, but if we don't write it down, we end up losing it. So I would say learn as much as you can from as many sources as you can, but when you hear those things that connect with you and connect with what you're trying to do or your business, write them down. And then when you go sit down at your desk again and you're ready to start working on your business, pull that up and use those little nuggets of knowledge that you got, apply them to your business, because those are the ones that hit home when you were learning it and you knew that you could apply those to your business. So when you sit down to work on your business again, pull that up, read those. It'll take you back to that mind state and allow you to implement that into your business. Okay, a couple more questions here. So question from, let's see here. Question from Anthony. How do you force yourself to take action when learning feels way easier? How do you force yourself to take action? I've found the easiest way to force yourself to take action is when you're investing in yourself. So if you're running at, $1,000 a month expenses because, you have your automation up and running and you have your website and you're running some ads, say it's a easy $1,000 a month expenses. If you're paying that yourself out of your own pocket, you're going to be motivated, especially, depending on your finances. That could be a lot or a little, depending on where you're at in your current financial situation. But the point is, if you're putting your money where your mouth is, you're typically going to work. And that's another reason why Founding Without Funding even exists, because not only do I not want you to wait for investors or funding, but I want you to put some of your own skin in the game, even if it's just a little bit, so that you have that motivation, because it's very easy to be, unmotivated when it's not your money. If it's somebody else's money, it's very easy to just skate by and just say, hey, we'll get another investment. We'll get more investment from that same person. Or, hey, it wasn't my money anyway. So after we ran through that 50,000, oh, well, right? But when it's your money coming out of your pocket every month. So when you look at that bank account and you see, okay, the bank account is negative because we lost money this month, I'm going to have to go into my own pocket and take away from my personal finances and put them into the business. Well, guess what? That next day, those coming days, that week, you're going to be busting your butt to try to make sure that you don't have to do that again. So I think one of the biggest things for founders to do is hold themselves accountable. And it's a lot easier to do without funding. So founding without funding is not just about not relying on an investor, but it's also about relying on yourself and holding yourself accountable. And where the rubber really meets the road is the money coming out of your personal account to cover the business expenses or not? Because that's what gets real. That's when it gets real. That's when the rubber meets the road. And you're actually saying, hey, that hurts. And I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to really get to work so that I don't have to keep coming out of pocket, that the business can support itself and then hopefully eventually support me as well. All right, last question we'll take here. Jasmine is asking, what's one piece of information you think people overvalue way too much? Let's see here. What's one piece of information that I think people overvalue way too much? I don't think there's any information that people necessarily overvalue. I think all information is great. I just think maybe information itself is overvalued. I think especially nowadays with all the coaching and trainers and speakers and courses, I think that the information itself is overvalued more so than the action. And unless your coach or motivational speaker or your course is actually giving you actionable items and helping you accomplish those actionable items, I think that might be the problem. It's just that there's too much information and the information is overvalued in general, and people thinking that if they take a course that they'll all of a sudden be, able to do anything and everything and get everything they want, when there has to be action along with it. So to answer your question there, Jasmine, maybe the information itself is overvalued, and I think action is undervalued. And I think when it comes to the Founding Without Funding principles, I think that action on your own is undervalued and funding things on your own. Because at the end of the day, even if it's a little amount of money, when something's coming out of your pocket, it changes your perspective on everything. And it definitely changes your work ethic on everything. All right, with that being said, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We will be live tomorrow. We appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.